Hello, my loyal subjects. Oh, I'm so happy to be with you today. This is the end of our summer reading program, and I thought I'd end it with a story. It's a very special story. It's the story about me and how I became a queen. Would you like to hear that story? Well, it all involves a spinning wheel. I was a very good spinstress. And it's the whole reason I became a queen. I really recommend learning to spin on a spinning wheel in these hard economic times. Because who knows, you might get a lot of wealth also. Well, let me start at the beginning. I wasn't always a queen. In fact, I wasn't ever even a princess. No, I was just a miller's daughter. Do you know what a miller is? A miller is a place where you take your grain, rye or corn or wheat nowadays, to a place where it is ground into flour. And my father was a miller. His name was John Miller, and he was a very good father and a good miller too. He just had two faults, maybe. One was that he did like a good cup of ale once in a while. And the other was he liked to tell a good story. Now, some people might have called his stories lies, but we never did. They were just good stories. You know what a good story is, don't you? Well, he was a very good father, and in the daytime I would help him at the mill. I would weigh the grain that the people brought in, and after it was ground into the flour, I would put it in the bags and stitch it up so they could take it home. And that was my job in the daytime. But in the evenings, I would go and sit by the fire and I would spin on my spinning wheel, because my mother had to weave the bags that we put the flour in. And those were woven out of thread. And the thread is made on a spinning wheel. And I'm going to tell you a little bit before I start the story of how I became a queen, by telling you a little bit about my spinning wheel. Today, what I'm spinning is called flax. And flax is a plant that grows from a seed. And I've got some here. It looks a little bit like straw, doesn't it? It's what you grow in the field with your wheat. And we would dry this, and then it went through quite a process of rotting it out and getting down to these fine little threads like you see on the distaff here. This is a distaff. And these were at one time inside the plant. It's sort of like celery. Do you ever eat celery? When you eat celery, have you seen those threads in the celery? That's what flax is sort of like. And it's because it's so long, it's a little unruly, so we put it on a distaff to keep it straight. And eventually, when it is woven into cloth, it can become linen. Can you imagine that started out as a plant and now it's a soft, white fabric? Well, anyway, that's what I'm going to be spinning today. And we keep it on the distaff. And then right here I have a little bowl that has water in it. And I keep my fingers wet when I'm spinning it. Now, if you can look way down at the bottom, down here, this is called the treadle. And if I push up and down on the treadle, well, there we go. That makes this stick over here go up and down, doesn't it? See it go up and down? And when that goes up and down, that makes this big wheel turn. And when the big wheel turns, there's a drive band on it. Do you have a bicycle? It's sort of like the chain on your bicycle. When you turn the one wheel, the other wheel turns too. And this wheel back here turns. You know, sometimes in fairy tale books, I have noticed that it looks like the lady is spinning this. This is not the thread the lady's spinning. It just connects the two wheels. And when this one turns, that turns. Maybe I'll turn this sideways just a little bit here so you can see. When this one turns, that turns the bobbin. And that's where the thread goes. So we're going from this sort of messy fiber, and spinning is all about twisting. Twist the fiber and makes it strong. So my story, well, maybe I'll do just a little bit here. Let's see if I can spin just a little bit for you. Get my fingers wet and pull down on the fiber, the flax or linen, and then it spins, and when I spin it, it pulls in onto the bobbin. That's a pretty amazing invention, isn't it? You know, before this, we only had that spindle that the other queen princess pricked her finger on and slept 100 years. Well, this was much faster and easier. You could sit down and do this, which was a great benefit, and it went faster. Well, back to my story, and we'll come back to this as we go through the story. So I was telling you about my father. Remember, his name was John Miller, yeah, because he was the miller. And one night, instead of going home and sitting by the fire and telling stories to my little brothers and sisters while I spun to make the thread for my mother to weave into the sacks, instead of doing that, he stopped by the local tavern. Yes, and he got to talking with Ben Smith. Now, can you guess? Ben Smith was the blacksmith. Yes, his name goes with him, too. And Ben Smith was talking about his daughter, Gertrude. Now, it seems like Ben thought his daughter, Gertrude, was the best spinner in the land. And he said, you know, one time my daughter spun a thread so fine and delicate that the spiders at my forge moved out of sheer jealousy. Well, when my father heard that, you can imagine, he decided that he could tell a better story than that. So he said, oh, Gertrude's nothing. You should see what my daughter can do. That was me. My daughter once spun a thread so fine that I caught a flea and I made a little tiny harness for that flea and hooked him to a wagon and sold him to the circus for a gold piece. Well, what do you think Mr. Smith thought about that? He said, well, my daughter could do a lot more than that. Her spinning was so smooth and luxurious that the king ordered all of his royal underwear made from it. Well, my father thought, that's nothing. My daughter can spin straw into gold. Well, Mr. Smith couldn't answer that one. And so my father got up, left, and very proud of himself for winning sort of the biggest story, or we might say lie, of the evening. The only trouble was that story spread throughout the land and got to the ear of the king. And the king thought, a maiden in my kingdom who can spin straw into gold? I must see this. And so he ordered that I be brought to the palace. Well, you can imagine, I was a good spinner. I could spin all night and make all the thread to make those bags. But I couldn't spin straw into gold. But the soldiers came and they took me to the king, and the king took me to a room full of straw. And I know all you Kansas children know what straw is, because you have a lot of it, especially this time of the year. And the whole room was full of this straw. And he said, I'm not sure your father was telling the truth, so you will stay in this room tonight and spin the straw into gold, or you and your father will suffer the consequences for your father's lie. And with that, he left and locked the door. Oh, I looked at all that straw, and I sat down on my chair, and I looked at the spinning wheel, and I knew I could spin, but I couldn't spin that straw into gold. And I did what any sensible girl would do. I just started to cry. Oh my goodness, I was crying. What else could I do? And all of a sudden, poof, there was a funny little man in the palace room with me. He was a funny little man. He wore a green suit, and he had on orange shoes, and he had a long pointed nose. He sort of startled me, but he said, "Why are you crying?" I said, "Well, the king wants me to spin all this straw into gold, and I can spin, but I can't do that." The funny little man said, "Well, I can do it." I said, "You can?" "Well, yes, I can, but you have to pay me something." And I thought, I have nothing. I'm just a miller's daughter. I'm just a poor maiden. And he said, "You have a necklace. Give me your necklace." Well, it wasn't a necklace like this. It was just a simple little gold chain with a little thing on it that my mother had given me. And I said, "Well, it's very special to me, but if you can do this, I don't want to be punished for my father's story. So, okay, I will give you my necklace." So that funny little man, he sat down at the wheel, and he put his little orange shoe on the treadle, and he made that go up and down, and that made the footman go up and down, and that made the wheel go round and round, and it started going faster and faster, so fast that I'm not keeping up. And right there before my eyes, that straw began to turn into bobbins of golden thread. And it wasn't long at all before it was sort of magic. It was all spun up. And I gave him my necklace, and I thanked him, and he left. Poof. Well, in the morning, you can imagine, the king came in and saw no more straw and just bobbins of gold thread. He was very, very pleased. But then he said, "This might be a trick. I think you better do this again." So he took me to another room, full with even more straw, and he told me to spin that into gold that night. And he left, and he locked the door. Well, you know what happened? I did what any sensible girl would do. I looked at all that straw, and I looked at my spinning wheel, and I sat down and I just cried. And I cried and I cried, but it wasn't too long before, poof, there stood that funny little man who had on a green suit and, orange shoes, and he had a long nose. Yes. And he said, "I can do it again for you tonight, but what will you give me?" And I thought, I'm just a miller's daughter. I gave you my necklace. I don't have anything else. Then I remembered I had a little maiden ring. I said, "Would you do it for my little gold ring?" It wasn't a ring like I wear now. It was just a simple little ring. And the funny little man said, "Yes." And he sat down at the wheel, and he put his orange shoe on that treadle down there, and he made the treadle go up and down, and that made the footman go up and down, and that made the wheel go round and round, and he spun that gold, and it went into on the bobbin, and before very long at all of the straw was spun up into golden thread. Oh, I was so happy. And I took off my little ring, and I gave it to him, and I thanked him, and poof, he was gone. Well, the next morning the king came in, and again he was very happy, But he said, you know, you are the most extraordinary woman. If you will do this one more time, one more roomful of straw into gold, I will marry you and make you the queen. So he took me to another room, full of straw. He went out the door, and he locked it. And I sat down, and I looked at all of that straw, and I looked at my spinning wheel, and I did what any sensible girl would do. I didn't cry. I just waited. I just waited, and sure enough, poof, that funny little man appeared in his green suit with his orange shoes and his long pointed nose. And he said, okay, I can do it again for you, but what will you give me? Well, that was the problem. I had given him my necklace. I had given him my little gold ring. I had nothing left. I was just a poor miller's daughter. And I said, I haven't anything left, but the king says he'll marry me, and then I will have lots. I could give you something later. No, that won't do. I need something tonight. I said, well, I have nothing, I told him. I have nothing to give you. And he thought a little bit. He said, I want your firstborn child. Oh, well, that didn't seem right. You don't give away a baby. You don't give away your child. I said, well, won't you just do it for gold or silver or jewels after I'm queen? No. I want your firstborn child. Well, what was I to do? If I didn't get the room spun up again, the king was going to punish me and my father. Then I thought, well, this is a long ways off. This is way into the future. So I finally said, okay, I will do that if you will spin the room full of straw. So that funny little man put his orange shoe on the treadle and made it go up and down, and that made the footman go up and down, and that made the wheel go round and round so fast like I had never seen before. And he spun all of that straw and filled the bobbins up with shiny gold thread. And when he was done, I thanked him, a little worried, and poof, he was gone. Well, the king came in the morning, and true to his word, he married me and made me the queen. And that's why I'm a queen today. And you know what? I didn't have to spin anymore, because by then I was rich and could have everything I wanted as the queen. And the king turned out to be a pretty nice gentleman. And we were living very happily, and 1 year later, I had the most beautiful baby boy. Oh, he was so gorgeous. And one night, as I was in my room singing him to sleep, poof, the funny little man appeared with the green suit, the orange shoes, and that long pointed nose. And he was so happy. He said, oh, thank you, give me your child like you promised. I said, no, you can't have my baby. He said, oh yes, you promised me, you must give it to me. I said, no, I won't give you my baby. And then I did what any sensible mother would do. I started to cry, and I started to plead, and I started to beg, no, don't take my baby, please don't take my baby. And finally, that funny little man had some pity on me. And he said, okay, I'll give you 3 nights to guess my name. And if you can guess my name, you can keep your baby. But if you can't, then the baby is mine. And poof, he was gone. Well, that wasn't as good as I wanted, but at least it was a chance. It was a chance to keep my baby. So I thought all day about names, and the next night when he appeared, poof, I I started guessing. And I said, is your name John? Is it Brian? Is it Joshua? Is it Nathan? Is it Eugene? Is it, oh my goodness. I kept guessing and guessing every name of every boy in the kingdom that I think I'd ever bet. And he kept saying, no, 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 no. And finally, poof, he just disappeared. So the next day, I got my ladies in waiting to come in and help me think of names. And we had a long list of names. And sure enough, when that funny little man appeared that night, and I started guessing names, and I said, is it Matthew? Is it Mark? Is it Luke? Is it Bartholomew? Is it Abraham? Is it Joshua? And he kept saying, no, 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 no. And I guessed, and finally, he just laughed, and poof, he disappeared. Well, now I was down to the third night. What was I going to do? Oh, I thought, well, maybe we can find out somehow what his name is. So I called my woodsman into the palace, and I said, woodsman, you know, out there in the woods somewhere, there's this funny little man, and you can recognize him because he has on a green suit and orange shoes and a long pointed nose. I want you to go and try to discover from somebody what his name is. I must know his name by tonight. So my loyal woodsman went out in the woods, and he went over the hills and down in the valleys, in the trees, the swamps, all over, looking for that funny little man. And finally, he came upon a fire with a funny little man dancing around it. And that funny little man had on orange shoes and a green suit and a long pointed nose. Well, he hid in the bushes, and he listened as the little man sang as he danced around the fire. And the little man sang his name. He snuck back out and hurried back to the palace and came to me and told me his name. So when the funny little man came that evening, and I started guessing names, I said, is it Balthazar? Is it Melchior? Is it Beelzebub? What is it? And he kept going, no, 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 with a big smile. And finally I said his name. Do you know what his name was? If you know what his name was, you say it with me. Rumpelstitskin! And the funny little man stamped his foot and disappeared. Oh! And I got to keep my baby and live happily ever after as a queen in fairy tale land. That's a good story, isn't it? I am very happy that all of you children were part of the summer reading program this summer. I hope you all read good stories and good books and learned good things and had fun with your imagination, pretending to be Robin Hood or Maid Marian or a princess or a fairy or whatever else you pretended to be. It's been a different summer with this plague, this pestilence that we have had. But we were managed to use our imaginations and still make it a good summer. So, have a very good day today, and see you soon. Bye-bye. Wait, Queen, wait.